Did you or did you not think in those hours at the time of the assassination, when we learned of it, and the immediate aftermath, that this would create some new problems for Israel, given that Rabin had this, as you described it, he was trustworthy, he had a great deal of integrity, sharp analytical mind. Did you think to yourself, this is going to be a difficult period for Israel in the wake of this shock?
Well, it was a difficult period. First of all, of course, to create a prime minister in Israel is always a harrowing experience. Given the fact that consensus is not the most highly developed Jewish quality. And so, but more important than this, Rabin had a gravitas and a seriousness that enabled him to rise above the typical debate. And so it was very hard, and Israel went through a lot of changes, but he was the right man for that moment, and it's been very difficult to find somebody who could so incarnate the qualities of concern for security and concern for peace, both.
It's been said in the years since his passing, what was said of him at the time, and let me, on a personal level, as a reporter, I've often observed this, what I believe to be true, that he had around him very, very few advisors. I don't know that as a professional journalist that I've ever seen a leader of his stature who had as few advisors around him. He would have, a communications press person, some other people. In terms of advisors, was that your impression?
That's a good question. I mean, it hadn't occurred to me, but I think that's probably true. I mean, if you asked me who was the top advisor of Rabin that you interacted with, I wouldn't really know. But that's partly because he made dealing with me his personal responsibility, but it's probably true. He was a loner in that sense. He read a lot, was very reflective, loved to play tennis. I don't want you to think that he was a bookworm, but he was self-contained.
Self-contained. Did you ever discuss with him, looking toward the horizon, whom he thought would be the most dangerous neighbor of Israel? For example, now here we are in the first part of the 21st century, and Iran is obviously a powerful and dangerous enemy and threat to Israel.
Well,
but that's not always been the case.
No, in those days, Iran was a friend of the United States and cooperating with Israel. So he would have looked at Iran as a solution, not a problem. And it shows what a tragedy it was in '79 when Iran changed sides. I guess he was most worried well, of course, there was always the Palestinian problem, but in most of the time that I knew him, he at first was most worried about Egypt because it was the strongest Arab nation. And it wasn't really until after the '73 war that the idea of a reconciliation between Israel and Egypt, so I would say until '73, Egypt was his principal concern. After that, he became a supporter of the peace process that had started then, which was to make a series of limited agreements called disengagement agreements. And his cooperation in that was essential because he could provide a military judgment that the withdrawal that was taking place, the disengagement agreements were limited withdrawals of Egyptian and then later Syrian forces in return for increased recognition of Israel and safety measures that were taken in terms of deployment. And he was prime minister during the biggest of those disengagement agreements that was just preceding the final agreement that then was made 3 or 4 years later. So he had been very positive in terms of, but that would have been Egypt was the big security problem, and after that I would have said Syria in his mind.
Now, I made a note to myself to be sure and ask you, because he was a serious person. He didn't take himself all that seriously, but he was serious about his work,
right.
Serious about what he saw as his mission in life, which was the survival, and not just survival of Israel, but that Israel should do well in the future. But I made a note to ask you about his sense of humor, because he rarely had it on public display, but a lot of people who knew him well during his life said, you know, yes, he can be taciturn, he can be, to use your phrase, self-contained, maybe even introverted, but he had a good sense of humor. Do you recall any instance where he played a joke on you, or told a good joke, or said something humorous?
Not to tell you the truth, I mean, I think he, but one of my personal difficulties is I can't remember any jokes. So I go through life hearing things that are very funny, and then I don't remember them. But I don't want to mislead the audience. I don't want you to say, I can't say that I remember him as, I can't remember any particular humorous
Well, let the record
event.
show that there are people who knew him well.
I don't doubt that it happened.
Let me get the, speaking of the record, let's get this straight. He may have told you jokes, but you can't remember them?
I can't quite imagine him telling a joke. But then I must say, this may be a professional deformity of me. I can't remember many people who've told me jokes. And, maybe I don't encourage that.
Dr. Kissinger, I want to paint a word image for you. There's a statue of Yitzhak Rabin. There are a number of ones. But a child, a fairly young child, say 10 or 11 years old, passes the statue and looks up and says to his adult companions, well, who was he? How would you answer that question?
He was one of the first Israeli leaders who had been born in Israel. He was a man who had grown up in Israel, who had experienced as a soldier and as a commander the return to Israel of large numbers of Jews. He had been part of this. He had seen the growth of the society amidst great dangers, and he had to fight in various wars. But he had gone beyond this experience to develop a greater vision of what the region might look like and what contribution its people could make, so that he was a symbol of the origin of Israel, of the evolution of Israel, and of the hope of the region, and not just of Israel, for a more secure and better life. That's how I would describe him.
Dr. Consiglio, I know that you have another appointment to get to. I want to join the audience in applauding your being here and giving us these insights. Thank you very much.